YouTube's telling me I'm live, so I must be live. Good evening, or I guess I should say good afternoon. Welcome. I thought maybe doing something, I don't know, it's not really different, I suppose, but maybe slightly. As I want to go more to One Ring. I've been talking about the One Ring on various shorts and other things since I played. Well, the last 2 weeks I've gotten to play in one session of the One Ring and also run a session of the One Ring. And so I've been talking about it because some background. I'm in a Brooklyn-based OSR Discord group, and one of the founders, maybe the founder, point of fact, of the group, has been extremely interested in playing, I think, a game in the Lord of the Rings setting. That is probably goal number one. Now, of course, when you look about, well, how can you do this? Of course, you could play any system you want and adapt it, blah, blah, blah. But, the One Ring system is sitting there. And I think recently they've wanted to do a couple things, play in Lord of the Rings type setting, also just play in a more of a campaign. So the way this particular group has evolved, they've been most often kind of a one-shot group. And I if you've followed any of my other streams or may have mentioned this, it's kind of it's fun in that you get to people, they're playing a lot of different systems. So on the nights when I can't play in my normal Thursday night game and I can play in a game, but just not that one, I will sometimes reach out and say, hey, is there a seat available on your Thursday night game? And it's a few times I've been able to go. It's always something different, and it's a lot of fun. And actually, one of those was the first time I played the One Ring. But there's been this desire to see if you can find a subset of the group who is interested. Now, I'm very much interested. I've wanted to play in this kind of world since I read the books and saw MERP and all that stuff. I never had a chance to really play MERP. So, I was interested. So we played in a couple one shots that he ran, and I think the only issue with those, not an issue per se, I guess it depends. On what you're trying to do. So we had a couple of objectives with these games. One was really system based, which was, hey, do we like this system? Because a couple of the options that we were discussing on and off was the setting, some kind of Lord of the Rings setting, and also what system to play the setting in. And the One Ring was a natural entry into, hey, let's use the One Ring system. But not everybody, I think, is in love with the One Ring system. Or in systems like that, some folks really like a more narrative or story game end of the spectrum. Some people really like the rules light end of the spectrum. Some people, maybe they read some bits of the One Ring and we're like, I don't know if that's for me. Whatever, right? There's a lot of there are a lot of reasons why you might just be like, yeah, the setting sounds cool in theory at least, but maybe the system in theory doesn't sound so cool. So part of one of the one shots was, okay, well, can we get a bunch of people around and, can we get a bunch of people to play? And then out of that bunch that plays, is there some subsect of that is interested enough in both things to want to continue, or one or the other? Because the outcomes of these games could have been, we want to play in Lord of the Rings in Middle Earth, but we don't want to use the One Ring, or we want to play in Middle Earth and we do want to use the One Ring. Of course, the third one is we're out on both, right? So played a couple of those games now, and I've discussed the game I played in previously, and this is just some kind of cold-ish tea that I'm going to warm up for the working man. I played in the first game, and it was fun. But an issue was that the GM was freelancing quite a bit, and this meant that the session was fun just in terms of play, no complaints. However, in terms of evaluating the system, it left a lot to be desired, just in that I couldn't tell from that. And, people asked me like, oh, what about this? What about that? And I said, yeah, we didn't really do that. Even though, say, for example, Journeys, which is the page you're looking at here, Journeys we could have easily done a Journey segment given what we were doing. We didn't do it. And I think the reasons for that are that the GM is much more interested in this setting and the system as an avenue to get to the setting than the system as a hardcore, like, we really need to follow these kind of rules type thing. And that's fine. That's just a style thing, right? But in terms of, it's hard to evaluate the system when you're dishing a lot of it. So I just think in terms of how they were approaching the game, they were not super focused on just getting all the rules. So as soon as they hit something when it wasn't immediately evident what rule to use, they were pulling from something else. And they're about, the same age group as I am, a lot of experience with different games. So, hey, I'll just pull this out of this other system that I know and I'll use it. And, that's something that as advice, I think we give a lot often, right? Not necessarily pulling from a totally different system, but hey, you're playing BX, you're playing, let's say someone say, hey, you're playing D&D 5th edition and some rule kind of came up and you don't know it, we'll say, hey, don't slow the game down by stopping to flip through the book. Pick something that works, make that ruling, and then later on you can fix it. You can educate yourself on the rules, so on and so forth. But it was a little bit maybe too extreme, at least for our purposes, in that if we were just playing to play, this is a one-shot at a convention or somewhere, and it's just like, hey, you want to play in Middle Earth? Heck yeah, and you don't really care about the One Ring, you just want to play in Middle Earth. It was really a fun session. I wouldn't complain about it at all. Just that in terms of, hey, we're trying to learn the system and kind of see how we feel the system, it didn't really work too well. But that first game I played in was months ago. Right? Then fast forward last week, or the week before that, when you're kind of prepping, and it's like, oh, we're gonna try to get it again. And that original idea of getting that subset of people who want to play kind of fell apart. No one was really so enamored with the system. They're like, yeah, I love this system play. I think that people like the setting as a fiction, but I think people had a lot of doubts about how playing in Middle Earth would be as opposed to reading about it. They saw a lot of limitations and things. And just so no one could really get to it. And I'm usually, unfortunately, I tend to be pretty non-committal with attendance. Like, yeah, I can come sometimes. I'm not gonna be able to come sometimes. So I try to avoid being the linchpin of like, yes, put me down as the every whatever night of the week it's going to be, because often I can't. Like, I feel like I have my Thursday night kind of committed and sort of locked in, and I don't necessarily feel comfortable locking in more nights. Maybe I can. That could be a me problem as much as anyone else. Maybe if I ask, people are like, yeah, of course you can. But, I just tend not. And especially if it ends up being like it's going to be a weekend game, then that can be, even tougher, because that tends to be kind of family time. So, hey, Ian. So this is where we found ourselves coming into this past week, when I was like, when I was coming to, okay, I'm gonna run a game. Now my goal. So I guess I should backtrack a little bit. The game before this, the game that I played in, I was very conscious this time in which I wasn't the first time we played. I just kind of rolled up, and we're gonna play, and I was just going with, hey, I'm just gonna follow the rules of whoever's telling the rules, right? I'm just gonna follow them. I didn't have a chance to really look at the book too much. I wasn't really I just didn't know the rules very much. I was going in mostly blind to a greater or lesser degree, and I played it that way. So it's really only afterwards looking through, I'm like, okay, yeah, we kind of skipped over. We did things a different way. When I played in the game, not this Tuesday, but the Tuesday before last, this past Tuesday, I was much more conscious of having some rules down, because again, I'm looking at it a little bit like I want to learn the rules. I want to play by the rules so I can evaluate the rules. So this time, when the GM would kind of start to freelance a little bit, I tried my best without trying to be a rules lawyer or a jerk. I would kind of try to let's reel this back in a little bit. Like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that. One time it was just kind of funny. I think there was something where I think I mentioned this on the stream, so apologies for double dipping my stories, but we were looking at a battlefield, or what had been the site of a battle. And he was trying to give us some information about what we could tell from the state of the battle. And he was going to he's like, just roll wits. All right. But we're rolling. The funny thing is the dice in the One Ring, so a couple things. You're using a D12 as your main die. And then if you have skill experience, if you have pips in your skills, you have points or whatever in your skills, you add extra dice they call success dice. And those dice, you add it to your 12 to hit target numbers. But then also, if those dice hit sixes, those success dice, which are D6s, if you get sixes, they also tend to give you can get some kind of special stuff depending, or you can look at it like just extra success, or sometimes they can unlock certain effects, basically. Okay. So when he says roll against wits is one of your attributes, but you're not in the system. You're not meant to roll against your attributes like that. And what's more, your attributes tend to be numbers higher than 12. So you're rolling so I'm looking at, I'm like, well, you're asking me to roll a D12 against a 15. I can't ever lose it. If I'm trying to roll under, then I'm always going to roll under. If I'm trying to roll over, it's impossible. And it's not about adding those extra dice, because I have no way to decide how many dice I should have, because it's not how the system works. And in fact, it was funny because as soon as we took a look at the skills, there was a skill that was exactly what he was asking for, which is a skill literally called Battle, which is all about tactics and things and being able to basically analyze battles, not about your skill with a weapon, but literally your kind of military and analytical type sort of skills. So there was a skill that worked really perfectly for that. But the fact is, just in his mode, it wasn't immediately on his top of mind to do that. He went to this, and then he went to something else, and then we were able to kind of roll it back and say, oh, this is how the game works, right? We should be looking at the skills, because the attributes, you're not supposed to be, that's not how you use them, and let's, you do it. And so we did, right? But there was still, again, there was a journey that we could have made that we didn't. There were other things we didn't do. So when I came to run the game this past Tuesday, I was very much trying to run it as rules is written, as close to the rules on the page as I could, because this is really, the chance for me. One, I'm running the game rather than playing it, so you get that different perspective. Hey, Croco. Two, and being that you're running the game, is you have a chance to set the tone in terms of the rules you're using, right? That's one of the things that GM gets to do, is more or less get to call the shots on the extent that we're using whatever rules, for the most part. This game seems to, I want to say it's even written in there somewhere, I think, unless I'm thinking of something else, that, it almost encourages players, and the way the kind of things are set up, you're almost encouraged to just go ahead and roll your skills, which is interesting. And I don't know whether I should be saying, hey, don't do that, or yeah, it's cool. Because you get times people are like, I'm going to roll my battle skill to look for this. And part of me is like, well, I have that whole thing like, hey, you just tell me what to do and I'll tell you what to roll. You tell me what your character does, I'll tell you what to roll. But I feel like I thought I read in here that they don't mind, that in this system, they don't mind if you call out. And in some case like that, it is the obvious skill to use. I think I still prefer, tell me what you're trying to do, and then I'll say what to roll. Because sometimes I wanted to actually just give away freebies, but they were already kind of rolling dice. I'm like, okay, you're going to roll the dice. I mean, that's kind of the interesting thing with a system like this, right? Because I also come from it. There's some interesting things, definitely, because this game is not an OSR game, number one. There are some kind of narrative things in here. So you have to put yourself in a different mode. And I know in some of the discussions around this game, I just felt like some folks were hitting it from an angle that was looking at it like it was trying to be an OSR game. So I would hear OSR terms being thrown out, like this doesn't have tactical infinity, or where's my tactical infinity? And it's like, well, not every game's trying to give you tactical infinity. That's really like an OSR buzzword sort of thing. Like, hey, this is the goal, is to have tactical infinity. But that doesn't mean that every game should have the goal of tactical infinity. And that's not what they're necessarily trying to do. So imposing that on this game isn't necessarily helping you understand or helping you really kind of grok whatever. Croco says players don't trust freebies. Well, it's not even that. It's like they didn't know I would have just given it to them because they were rolling the dice already. But once they decide to roll the dice, I'm like, well, we'll roll the dice. And we'll see. And I think, as a GM, you just decide whether that means if there's extra info, they get it, or what the fail. What does the failure mean? There actually are. They do have a few things. I feel like there's some things that are kind of hidden in this book that maybe should be more pronounced about how to modulate success and failure and whatnot, depending on what the party's doing. So I streamed this on the other channel where I did a little bit of prep, not a good amount of prep. and I was a little bit nervous about it, but what I decided to do, so we did, again, one of the other things we did not do before is we formally created the company. So the first thing we did when we got there on the game was, hey, we did a little bit of this in Discord beforehand, which I always recommend. If you have all your players on Discord or some other chat, group message, whatever, and to the extent that people have free time before the game to do little bits of that, like just do some of the stuff in advance, because you're able to kind of get some stuff sort of out of the way, so that when you actually have your game time, you don't have to spend it doing some things that could have easily been a couple of text exchanges during the day. So one of the things I went over in this Discord little thread was, hey, here are the you're a company. If you want to talk about how you met, that's fine. But maybe more importantly, who your patron is. And your patron is someone who can kind of give you stuff. They give you direction. They can kind of focus your attention on what you should be doing. And they also have, there's a mechanical bonus. And as you've created this company, you get fellowship points that you can spend to do stuff. And you get those every session. So it's another way to mitigate poor die results and things, or to amp up things, or just do different things. You have these fellowship points that you have, but you only have those if you actually have gone through the process of making the company. We hadn't done that before, so we did that. They ended up picking Kierden the Shipwright as their patron, and I guess I can go. I just have this journey page on what I'm not ready to go to yet. Let me see. I can go back. We can go to the fellowship stuff. Here we go. So here are the starting patrons that they talk about in the book. And what I tried to do, Croco says they're your patron, their patrons the quest. You could do that. No, well, not really, but. So what I like about the patrons, and this is similar if you heard my or watched my video with Jack yesterday about Mythic Bastionland. Something that Mythic Bastionland does a good job with is focusing you as a player on the things you should be doing. So we kind of, when in doubt, you can look at your sheet and the stuff that says, follow the quests, honor the seers, protect the land. And you have this kind of, it's like a North Star. Like, I don't know what's going on, but this is what we should be doing. So what's the nearest thing we could do to that fulfills one of those things? And then, on top of it, in that game, Mythic Bastionland, we also had this kind of beginning set of instructions we were to follow. So between those two things, we were never in doubt about what to do. It was never, we're in this land. What do we do? It's like, well, we got our marching orders, A, and if whatever that happens, we also have this other part B, right? So we have these two things. And I think the One Ring is doing something similar. Characters have their own kind of drives, but those are on a character-to-character basis. These are, okay, you as a group are deciding kind of what you want to do. What are the kind of things you want to do? And so that's to do with picking your patron. So when I pitched these on the Discord, I don't know if this is good or bad, but this is how I decided to do it. I said, look, forget the names. Don't worry about who the actual patron is. Not to say it's not important. Maybe you might be a player who's, hey, I want to talk to Bilbo. I want to be involved with Bilbo. So whatever Bilbo's thing is, I want to do because I just want to be around Bilbo. I want to interact with Bilbo because he's always one of the heroes of the world. It's like, well, that's fine. But I think probably the more important thing for me is, in a sense, this is setting what kind of, and really what this is asking you is to say, what types of adventures are you as players interested in? So that's kind of how I pitched it. So I grabbed these agendas and I rolled them out, and I wrote them out. So we got, Balin wants to reclaim lost strongholds. Obviously, makes sense for him if you remember his story, and eliminate enemy lieutenants. Bilbo wants to recover lost lore and lost things. Círdan wants to rekindle hope and preserve the lore of the ages. Gandalf wants to warn the free peoples and inspire them to action. Gilrain's daughter of Dirael, who I don't know who she is, if she was a minor character or that they just made her up, but she wants to fight the enemy and defend the weak. And then finally, you have Tom Bombadil and Lady Goldberry, who want you to protect the land and find and preserve what was buried. So you pick one of these, and they each give you some potential fellowship points, and they also give you another kind of cool ability in a sense. So, for example, Tom Bombadil and Goldberry, you can, if you spend all your fellowship, however much that is, you can call them to intervene as anywhere within Tom's country, which is cool because it mimics the how Tom helps the fellowship in the books. Right there in the Barrow-wights' lair. And it looks pretty grim. I think Frodo manages to stab it with Sting or cut it with Sting. And then he remembers the song, tells a song, and Bombadil comes running in like he's the Kool-Aid man and saves them. So it's really powerful. You have to have at least one fellowship point, presumably. But it's also it only is going to happen in a small place because Tom's country is not great. Croco says, seems kind of unspecific, the goals. I think that's intentional. I mean, it's not a specific thing. To me, these are good because these are what are the types of things you want to do? I think that what too often happens in games is that you get these very specific goals And then it's like, well, what do I do when and then they get fulfilled, and then the question is, well, what did I do? Do I quit the game now? If your goal is save your sister and you save your sister, there's no more adventuring. But I think when you look at heroes, and I think like comic book heroes are good examples of this, they have goals that are not super specific if you think about them. Someone like Batman wants to protect the weak or the vulnerable in Gotham City. So that's what he's going to do. And that why he has that goal is because of this, or if you want to say he wants to get rid of the crime in Gotham, whatever it is, it's not specific to a person. It's not specific to an incident. It may have been brought about. It may have been the genesis of it may have been in a specific incident, or maybe Spider-Man's a good one, or he wants to protect the people, his neighborhood, or just people in general. And why? Because he let down that responsibility with his Uncle Ben. Yeah, of course he wants to find the guy who dispatched Uncle Ben, and depending on the version of the comics, blah, blah, he does or he doesn't or whatever. But that doesn't, okay, Spider-Man doesn't hang it up because he's done. His goal is this basic, I'm going to protect, I'm going to save, I'm going to stop bad people from doing bad things. So I think it's good that it's vague. I don't think it's supposed to be hyper specific. I'm sure that you as a party can build in something specific within that goal, but I think where the specificity is going to come from is when you start getting into what what your company is actually doing. And then that becomes a specific, adventure that fits within that goal. But it's also not ironclad. You can do something else. Presumably, you may not get. I don't even. It's not like your patron's going to come out and bop you on the head if they're Círdan's. Their patron is Círdan, and they do something that's, I don't know, a Bilbo thing. They're not. Círdan's not going to show up. Slap them with a gloved hand and then dump them. All right. Kronko says, if I was a player, I wouldn't really know what to do to get those agendas without more specific situations detailed. So I would probably ignore them and just set my own goals. I guess the idea is doing that and keeping in line with the agendas. Well, I mean, I don't know, Kronko. I feel like you're not giving enough credit. I think what happens, and I can tell you what I did with this adventure is, so first of all, I don't think this game is set up to be just a sandbox. I don't think that's how we're going about it. I think this game to me, seems much more geared into there is an adventure and you go on the adventure. And oftentimes I think that you can take the same adventure and simply modulate it slightly. And some of them could be interrelated. For example, let's see, you could have something where you could both fulfill the Bilbo's patron agenda, recover lost lore and lost stuff, and Círdan's or Balin's reclaim strongholds. If there's something lost in a stronghold and you both reclaim the stronghold by clearing it out and recover some lost stuff, like you've done that. And if you have your eyes as a GM, or as they say, the lore master, on a particular adventure, it's very easy to say, like, okay, this adventure is going to be this, but here's the pitch for you guys is, oh, you guys are Balin is your patron. Okay, well then the focus is going to be on recapturing this tower that has fallen and is now inhabited by orcs. Oh, your patron is Bilbo. Oh, well, there's something that's lost that you want to get it was last seen in this tower, and it just so happens that tower has orcs in it, and to get that thing, you're gonna probably have to clear the tower of orcs. So whatever, or your Gilrain. Well, this is you're fighting the enemy, right? So a lot of these are interconnected, but they're going to give you an angle to pursue. But I don't think you're meant to do this. Is, hey, you're in Bree one night. What do you do? I don't think that's what they're trying to do. I think they're trying to be like, here's the thing that's happening. Let's do it. So, I mean, maybe you could. I mean, look, you could. I mean, you could easily take a few things depending on how comfortable you are with the system and be like, there's 3 things going on, and you could kind of sort out which one you want to do. But I think ultimately, to me, I see this as more of you're going on specific adventures. And you could probably, especially as you're going along, of course, you could supplement it with, I think, with all these games. I mean, the world is open. It's not like you can't sandbox it out. But I think you're doing adventures, and then as player goals, or you're accumulating things you want to do, you can also do those as adventures, right? But I certainly would. I don't think you kind of start there unless you have a very experienced group. But like I said, I don't think the rules are really geared up for that. Quago says, guess I'm too focused on sandboxing. Well, I think that's an issue, not an issue. I think it's something that I definitely experienced, and I mentioned that in a short the other day, right? Of, hey, try to meet the system where it lives. And it's definitely something I've been in a little bit of a tension with this game. Like, okay, there are things that part of me wants to go, oh, I'd like to change that. But I also recognize that, am I changing stuff just to turn this into more or less another game that I already know? Like, are all the things that I'm thinking about, like, oh, maybe I do this, am I just really making it into some kind of BX type game? And like, I already have BX, right? I already have sandbox, hex crawly systems. I should probably try to see, well, what is this game doing? And can I help that system, or can I figure out how to do that system that way and do that rather than, whatever's going on with something else. So it is definitely interesting to take a look at the rules. So I hear you on the I definitely hear you on the looking at the rules and just how you interpret them and whatnot. But we got to try to keep it in check. So on this game, they picked we went through, we picked our patrons. I'm picking Kierdan, which is great. And so his Kierdan's goals are rekindling hope, preserve the lore of the ages. And so, again, they are vague. What does rekindle hope mean? Well, as things bad, again, it helped because orcs attacking is both a fight the enemy type thing, but you can also pitch it as the attacks of orcs are making people succumb to hopelessness. Right. So then the same, like I was saying before, there's a lot of overlap where the same adventure that might be you fighting orcs to defeat the enemy because you're a Gilrain, that's your patron, could easily become a Kierdan as your patron because you're fighting the orcs to restore hope, to show that the world is not hopeless, right? That there is still good. There's still good in men or in hobbits, dwarves, elves, whatever. So I started them at Bree because I thought, what, let me not go somewhere. When I played in the game, we played in part of Gondor that was not covered by anything. And I think that GM liked that aspect of it because he's kind of had a free hand because there's nothing there. And it was sort of on a part of not that there's nothing there. There's not, as far as I know, there's no material release that's there yet. So it felt like, I could just do what I want. But I wanted to take advantage of all the material. So I thought, I want to start in Bree because that is very well supported by the material. And that way it saves me in having to come up with stuff or whatever. Like at this point, I wanted all the help. I wanted all the help that I could get. So, we started Prancing Pony. I did roll. There are some tables. One of the interesting things I think as we go in here is that it's really interesting to look at these things that the book gives you, but I don't know, they necessarily, like they give it to you, but they also don't necessarily formalize how you want to use it. Let me give you an example of that. So we've got, just trying to get to the appendices here. Bear with me. Or is it in the appendix? No, it's here. So the first thing I did was I started them at the Prancing Pony and we rolled for whoever came in. And I just did that to see if it would be fun. I wasn't concerned if it ended up being, Gandalf shows up and gives them a quest because I could just, that's the thing with these adventures. I had this quest, which I'll show, which was in the appendices also. They have these neat things they call landmarks. Essentially, it's a little kind of mini adventure, small little adventure, a location based. You can have kind of things going on. There's certain things about it, and it's got some enemies and stuff, and you kind of go, it's much more involved. If you were to compare it to, say, a myth from Mythic Bastionland, I've only gotten to look at a screenshot of one, but the Myths in Mythic Bastionland is one page, and it's got 6 pretty, right, it's got 6 events and a couple things that's the whole thing. Everything else you're making from whole cloth. These landmarks, these mini adventures are multiple pages long. They tend to have some maps. I'll show you the one that they're in the middle of that I used. So I had that. So I wasn't concerned about blowing up what I'd prepped, because one, I hadn't prepped very much, and two, if it turned out like Gandalf is here, then Gandalf would just say, I need you to go do this thing, and that thing would be the thing that was going to have them do anyway. Okay. So we rolled, I think I had one of them roll the dice, and they actually got, and ended up being kind of fun, but not much, is what was it? An impending brawl with John Fernie. And it turned into a fun thing where they were asking, well, why are they fighting? And I don't know what I didn't look up exactly. I kind of meant to, and I forgot to look up kind of what the time frame of the One Ring is in terms of, I know it's after the Battle of Five Armies and presumably Bilbo's return, but I didn't know how much time had passed. So I kind of said in some, excuse me, not immediately after, but fairly soon after Bilbo's return and all that. And I had the guys fighting over, wondering about if there's more treasure and stuff around and stuff like that, which was actually a little bit of a mistake, because I kind of had to, for a minute there, I thought people were going to get like, we're going to go on this kind of treasure hunt. And I was like, oh, no, that's not really what I had in mind. I mean, I could have turned it back onto what I was trying to get to, but it was fine. But it was kind of fun. A little moment there of them fighting, and one of the players was playing a hobbit, so they got to act like, they got to pose themselves like, hey, I know Bilbo, I've seen Bilbo, and this is what's going on, and it was fun. It was a fun moment. It was a nice little start. Krakow says, seems to be on the game end of RPGs. I don't know what you mean by game end, Krakow, in terms of rolling dice. I mean, it's just a random event, so I wouldn't put it on any different level than any other kind of random event sort of generator. And Krakow also says, anyone named Barnabas not being a wizard should be illegal. Is one of them named Barnabas? I didn't even notice. Who's named Barnabas? I don't know. Oh, Barnabas Butterbur. Oh, yeah, he's the proprietor. Old Barney Butterbur. Okay, so we did that event. And then I think I had one of them who was an elf have a letter from Círdan essentially saying like, hey, we've lost contact with folks traveling the Greenway up from Sarn Ford. So go check it out. And I think maybe it might be a good idea to have the map. Do I have the map handy? Hold on a minute. I should have it right. Okay, so just to put things in perspective, this actually took me a little while because I was misreading the titles. One thing I have to say I think they should fix or do something with is, in the book, they were referencing the Elvish names for things, which is fine, is cool. However, the maps I should say they're not consistent. So the books, and I'll get to it. The book places the landmark we're trying to get to on this spur of mountains down here. Okay, the spur of the Blue Mountains, but they refer to them as the Arid Luin, which is the Elvish name for the mountains. But nowhere does it say Arid Luin. It just says Blue Mountains. So it's really, and it wasn't that because I was not using the internet or anything to look it up. I was going around and around like, what is Arid Luin? What is Arid Luin? And I know it's something in here. I just couldn't remember what it was. Is it a river? Is it something like, is it the name for the Gray Flood, the river? Like, I was just getting kind of like, where is it? Right. It should have been more obvious because of all the book stuff takes place essentially in this area, but still, I was just, I just don't know where it is. It wasn't ringing a bell. And it would have been just so easy just to put Arid Luin Blue Mountains, right? And at the same time, you have here, they give you the name of the Brandywine, the Elvish name, Baranduin. But if you don't really recall that that's the name of the Brandywine is essentially a what would you call it? Just the way that, how it just got translated from Elvish to, I guess, Westron via Hobbit, whatever, you could go past you. Now you see Brandywine Bridge up here. Maybe read that and go, okay, this is the Brandywine. And they're pretty close, right? But it's another thing where it's like, why not just have both names in there? Even so on kind of different segments, have Blue Mountains, I don't know. It just felt like, why not? You're just making it a little bit harder than it needs to be when you're going to, and be consistent. If you're going to go Blue Mountains, this should be Brandywine. This shouldn't be Baranduin and or it should be Arid Luin and Baranduin, and then be consistent. Something. It's just a little something where I was like, seems a little bit. It's just a little harder to parse, maybe if you're not kind of super focused on things. So there, Bree, and I said, yes, bad stuff's happening when you get to here. To Sarn Ford, there's disappearance. Things are kind of people are disappearing. Things are happening, and it seems to be kind of in sort of this area. Kind of here is sort of the trouble zone. So this is perfect for having a journey. So we'll get into the journey. So what you're supposed to do and what I tried to do with them, and it was great because I have the starter set that has a map. So does the host has it, the map. So we're able to literally lay the map down, the player map, not the hex map version. Because this shading is not just for beauty. It tells you green are what is it? It's green are Borderlands, Wildlands, yellow, Darklands, orange. So these have meaning that the players aren't really supposed to know. Now, if you know anything about the books, you know the Barrow Downs are not a lot of fun. You kind of right, but you don't necessarily supposed to know all these and kind of where they border and all that stuff. So the party picked. So there were two choices, and I liked it. And this is something that's kind of fun, which I like, which I appreciate about just kind of hexcrawling in general. You can go any way you like. If they just wanted to go cross the Barrow Downs into the Old Forest, follow the river, they could have done that. If they wanted to take the road and go over to basically the Mickle Delving and then down here like this to get to the ford, because that's what they presume is their first stop, they could do that. Or they could take Bree and take the most direct but not dangerous route of following the greenway down and then cutting over. They can do that. Croc says, "Real downer, those barrows." Yeah, they're definitely downers. So they chose the direct route, which is following the greenway down and over. So I really like that. And then what you do is with the travel rules is that you start counting. You as the referee have access to the map, and you're counting your hexes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7, 8, 9, something like that, more or less. And then they're rolling dice, and depending on how, so you. Sorry, I'm going too fast. I'm going ahead of myself. You figure out the route of the journey. You're also setting them out different rolls. There has to be a guide, and there can only be one guide, and that one guide is making the travel roll. The travel roll will determine how far you're getting before you need to roll for events. And then the events, and this is where I'll switch back. The events seem to focus mostly on the other people part of it. Let's just go back so we can look at it. Back. Here we go. Right. So you have the map. So someone's the guide. You can only have one guide. Everything else you can double up on. In their case, they actually had to have one person take on a couple of roles because they were only 3, and there are 4 roles. So someone had to be, I think someone ended up being both the scout and the hunter, I think, and then one person was lookout. Excuse me, and then one person was the guide. So the guide you're rolling, and that roll, these marching tests, determine how far you're getting before you get an encounter of some sort or some kind of test. And then you also travel, I think it might say on here how far you travel in a day. I think it's 3 unless it's hard. I think something like that. I don't remember. It is somewhere. But I think you could basically go 3 hexes per day unless it's hard country, in which case it's 2. Now, as far as I know, I couldn't see anything to suggest that you were tracking rations or things like that. It seems to be that what's happening, the way this is set up, is you're kind of traveling and you're living off the land as you go. And that's why you have someone who's hunting, and that's why you have these different people, different roles. So the hunter, it doesn't have to be, it can be foraging, scavenging. It doesn't have to be literally hunting. But the hunt, that's just their term for you're going out to get provisions, essentially. So presumably fiction-wise, hey, Twin Steel, fiction-wise, your hunter's going out there and gathering and find stuff as you're traveling. And I'm sure it's traveling, maybe you're taking a break, whatever. But, in the overall the day, they're going off and doing that. The lookout obviously is looking out. The scout is checking for trails, all that kind of thing. So that is all happening over the course of the day. So if you're rolling and you don't get the hunter doesn't come up, then I believe it's presumed that the hunter is just successfully hunting, right? Or the scouts successfully scouting ahead. But when you're rolling an incident, it's usually something that's happened that's wrong, though there is a couple in here that actually there's 3 in here. It's not all wrong. There's 3 of them here that are positive and 3 that are negative. So it's actually now I'm looking at it's pretty balanced. However, when these things happen, it's a skill challenge. It's not even a skill challenge. It's really a single roll. I mean, overall, you can look at journeys as a skill challenge in that you're doing you're rolling a certain amount of dice. You can't fail it in the sense of you don't reach your destination. You're pretty much going to get, I mean, I guess there could be a point where you take so much fatigue that maybe you're just knocked out. I don't know. And I'm not sure what you do at that point. You probably have to play out a scene of something, but presumably you're not going to not get there. But you're getting on fatigue and you're potentially extending the travel, and you can pick up wounds. So I guess you could definitely die if I think you pick up enough wounds, and certainly that can muck things up for you. You're picking up fatigue and other things happen. So the events that they have are and then you're rolling for which of these other roles, not the guide, which of the other roles is who is this mishap or incident happened to. So it can either be the scouts, the lookouts, or the hunters. And so the mishaps you have are terrible misfortune, and there are roles for all of these. So what you're supposed to do is, okay, I've rolled, and it's the scout that's being targeted. So now so what's supposed to happen is that, okay, they're moving down this road. Oh, you're leaving here. And it's like, okay, well, you're in the evening. You're in the evening after, or you're just before you're getting ready to stop marching for the day. The scout, you've gone ahead to look at something, and this has happened. Okay. And then the scout makes a roll, and then that roll determines essentially if it's bad. I mean, at least for the case of the bad ones, if it's bad or not. Croco says, how do skill challenges feel if you've ran them before? Not sure I'm a fan. So, okay. So in skill challenges, the first time I ran into skill challenges and interacted with them was 4th edition. I didn't love them. There are different ways to do them. It was really Matt Colville, I think, kind of repopularized them and brought them. Other people have too, but I feel like he was a voice, at least in social media, RPG YouTube and all that stuff, that kind of was a fan of them, that I think led to a lot of people porting it into 5e. And of course there are different ways to do it. The generic way that I'm recalling from 4e, so apologies if I'm getting it slightly off, is that you're you have a certain amount of successes you have to do versus a certain amount of failures you can get, misses. You're going around the room and you're asking everybody to, given the situation, pick a skill to use, obviously explain how you're using that skill, and then make the roll to see if you do it or not. The problem I have is that they tend to lock you into a certain set of actions or certain. Let me give you one example. And of course, people, and look, and anytime if I say that, so I'm sure someone who loves skill challenges is going to be, oh, it doesn't have to be like that, whatever. Okay, I don't know. I can only talk about practically my experience with them. So one of them, like I remember I was the player in, we're racing across rooftops, and we have to, and something big, it might have been some kind of, I don't know if it was, some kind of huge creature is rampaging through a city or somewhere. And we got to run across these rooftops, or it might not have been that dramatic. I don't remember exactly, but we either had to chase somebody across rooftops or run from somebody across rooftops. Either way, the skill challenge is where you have to do so many successful roof jumps before you get so many failed roof jumps before, either the whole thing fails and then you resolve it, or you succeed and then you resolve it that way. Okay, but the problem is that you're stuck jumping rooftops, right? The idea that can I get off this roof and run along the streets below? Can I do something else? I don't even know if it's what if I've got the fly spell or I don't even, there's these things where it's no, you have to do these, your set of choices is fairly limited, and it is very much look at your book kind of thing, because it's a skill challenge. It's, you are literally directly referencing your skills, and then you're succeeding on them. So if you come up with something brilliant off skill, I mean, I guess a good GM would be okay, I'll have you roll against just your dexterity or not. But, then, you just you're sort of stuck there. And then, of course, it also means that if you're not gifted in those things, there oftentimes isn't really ways for people to help, or limited ways to help. Like if you're playing a wizard and you are not fast and you are not strong, and so you don't have great athletics, and now it's like, well, now you got to do this jumping across rooftops thing. That you have a very limited number of skills that really pertain to that kind of challenge. Like what am I supposed to do? I can't. Can I study Can I study the building? Can I study the building architecture to figure it out? I mean, maybe, but most GMs are probably not going to go, oh yeah, for this running and jumping challenge, you can use your intelligence or something. Maybe they would. I don't know. So I just, didn't care for them. So Twin Steel has actually got the opposing view. So Twin Steel says, I do love skill challenges as they exist in modern house rule melange, but back then it was undercooked and confusing. Now there's so many more variations that benefit from 20 years of play. Yeah, I'm not up on all different ways of running them. I have no doubt that people have solved some. Maybe they solved all these systems, but I just tend to just give me the free flowing play. If we're on some rooftops and we're chasing some thieves, we don't need to drop out of regular role play mechanics to go to this kind of special thing. Let's just do the thing. That's kind of how I tend to feel about it. But I think I will say that what the skill challenge accomplishes is that you don't have to have, if you're someone who is, and the more complex, the more gears your system may have, you may be worried about, well, what is this? How do I, if you're afraid of, in something like, say, 5th edition or even 4th edition, like, how do I run this? Oh my gosh, we're running rooftop jumping and running and jumping, rooftop. What's a fair way that I can do this? Skill challenges kind of gives you this thing that you can apply to anything. Like, I don't need to know how jumping rules work or running rules work. I don't need to worry about it. I'm not going to worry about any of that. All we're going to worry about is ultimately mechanically X successes over X fails. And then we get to kind of really abstract away from it to something very generic that the players, that you are supposed to role play it up. You're not supposed to say like, oh, jump check, I made it, let's go. You're supposed to say, okay, well, I take a running start and then I really push off and do whatever. But ultimately you're doing that, but you're also, you're making the jump roll. But it's fine. I think it kind of, I think it comes into like, what do you want to do? What are you trying, this is a bit of that, what are you trying to elide away, right? You don't want to play moment to moment. If you're playing through a skill challenge, you're not trying to play moment to moment through these hilltop chases. You're not trying to put out, if you're doing on grids and minis, you're not trying to lay out a whole grid of building tops and have people move around. You don't want to measure the distances. You don't want to worry about it. So you do it as a skill challenge. So it is a very easy way to potentially cover complicated scenarios. But I think oftentimes I find that I don't know, I just felt like maybe it's a little bit too much. But I also like more lighter systems I think do better where you don't really need to do that because the systems are light enough that you can just kind of run it a little bit loose anyway. But it's something like 4th edition, which is really tactical, 5th edition, which is fairly tactical. Maybe a lot, that you doing it as a skill challenge, I think removes people going, yeah, but saying something like, well, I go 240 squares and they go, so I should be doing. It's like, well, we're doing it as a skill challenge, pal. So we're doing its other systems, so don't worry about any of that. Twin Steel says, yeah, they're just one tool in the DM toolbox. Shouldn't be the answer to all scenarios. And also they can be applied broadly and like that, but if you don't like them in your game, that's okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously, yes, like everything you should take or leave it. Now, journeys, just getting back to journeys, so they work in that kind of skill challenge way in that the guy is rolling a die. That die is going to basically set how far you travel before you start hitting events. You're always going to hit an event, but I think it's basically every 2 hexes or every 3 hexes, something like that. You're hitting that challenge. And then once you hit that event, then you resolve the event. You decide you could roll dice, or you could probably choose to, but you're kind of rolling dice to decide, okay, which one of these rolls is this event affecting? Either your scouts, your lookouts, or your hunters. And then you kind of roll to see, well, what kind of event is. And there are 3 good ones, 3 bad ones. I haven't checked out the odds to see if they're any more likely. It looks like they're pretty much, I'm getting the sense they may be just about the same likelihood. Maybe I guess you're a bit more likely for a mishap. But you get despair, you get ill choices, an actual mishap, and then on the positive side, shortcut, a chance meeting, or a joyful sight. Twin Steel says, it's been said that the best skill challenges are the ones the players aren't aware that they're in. Yes, that is, you probably could. You could probably sit there and keep it behind your back and you're just like, hey, you're doing this, like, what do you do? And then as they're doing some rolling dice, you're ticking off how well they're doing. And then Croco says, I guess combat is just a long skill challenge if you squint hard enough. Yeah, I think so. Where it's going to come down to is how you feel about the lack of choices. And this is where I think the journey, I know at least one person who it's kind of struck the wrong way, because they look at journeys and say you're not making any choices. You're literally rolling dice, rolling more dice, resolving it. And yes, I as the GM am narrating, but you've made one macro choice, which is that route of travel. Everything after that is just a series of rolls. Right. And yeah, you can gussy it up like a skill challenge, but like that. So in combat, you might say, yes, it is a skill. Yes, it is like that. But there are lots of micro decisions within combat that you are making. Hey, Twin Steel, thanks for hanging out. In combat, you have a lot of micro decisions around those sets of dice rolling. So it's a bit of how zoomed in or zoomed out you want to be. A lot of skill challenges are probably zoomed out a moderate amount. You might look at journeys and say they're zoomed out a fair bit more. So you think about I think you have to look at and say, well, what are you trying to accomplish, and kind of what are you trying to do? So someone was telling me that in some of the, I haven't been in like the One Ring discords and places like that there's been, whether you should add more actual like potential creature encounters in here where you might have combat or other stuff, and how you should handle that, because this system doesn't really have any. You can meet someone by chance, but it's generally a good thing. Joyful sight's a good thing. Oh, my camera just went out on me. Hold on a minute. Why did you do that? Get back up. It'll come back in a second. Take a sip of, there we go. Take a sip of juice. So really it's about, sorry, what was I saying? It's kind of about how zoomed in you are, your scale, and what you're trying to do. So for combat, for journeys, for different things, you're kind of at different levels of darkness, surprise attack. Yeah, exactly. You're kind of these different levels. So sorry. So I kind of got lost a little bit there as I was bunking around with my webcam. On some of the One Ring community, apparently there's some arguments over, or not arguments, I guess discussions about, adding in creature encounters, because there aren't any, kind of by the book, at least ones that are kind of negative. And would that impact you too hard by the time you get to the adventuring site? Kind of, you're trying to get to, remember? So we're going through this journey to get to kind of the adventure area, which is down here. So in a sense, and then the funny thing is that these distance between this kind of what we're calling the adventure area, that we ended up doing it maybe a little bit like another kind of mini journey, is almost as big. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, it's only three hexes shorter than the actual journey. So I think it seems to me that what the rules are what the system's trying to do is have you have these long. So I think it's pretty interesting. I don't know if it's totally successful, but I think I think I see where they're trying to get at. Right? So you have this journey that's getting you over these long swaths of country in a way that is flavorful, because it's going to be impacting you in the cases of you're picking up this fatigue as you're going along. You're potentially getting dinged up, you're wounded, right? It's wearing you down, which is what happens in the books. Oops, I hit my mic there. So you definitely see that in the books, where the journey wearing you down. It's wearing you down, right? But then you are actually having to get somewhere to do something, and then you have to make the best of whatever your state is when you get there, which I think then also impacts the choices you're making. The more desperate you are, then perhaps the more likely you are to do things that will result in taking on shadow points, which is that kind of pulling you towards the dark side, if you will, which you're trying not to do. Croco says the classic narrativism versus simulationism conundrum. I guess is the goal, not the journey in this case. Well, I think that like I said, I think the journey, that's what I feel like the journey's trying to give you. The journey, we all know in the stories that whether it's The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, characters travel these great distances. And I think they want to give you that. But I think they also maybe understand, or at least their understanding is that, and I don't necessarily disagree with them, that a lot of the happenings in the books don't necessarily happen on the on those travel segments. They're a lot about letting you set the scene and the tone and the stakes and all this stuff. Not that nothing ever happens on the roads. Obviously, there's the chase, Weathertop, and then there's the chase along the road with the Black Riders to the last gate. But there's also a lot where it's like, okay, we're deciding to go from Bree and we go to the Weathertop and we pass through the marshes. And once they make the decision to go out and to forsake the road to go into the wilderness, they're not making micro decisions inside of here. It's like, well, we're just gonna have to go through the marshes to get there. So, we've decided we're going, well, it's not really here. Well, we decided to go from Rivendell and follow down to the Redhorn, try to take the Redhorn Pass. They're not, there's not a lot of decisions until they get to the Redhorn Pass, realize they can't take it, and like, nope, we gotta have to go around to Moria. Right. That's kind of how they go. So it's kind of interesting. I think you could read it a different way, but I think it's a reading. So I think the system is trying to give you that, where you're feeling the effects of the road, and you get to, and you as the lore master are building up that narrative. Whoops, I was going to see that, maybe do that later, or of going through and that kind of wearing down, and it's, you get to learn, you get to explain about what's going on with the land and all this stuff, right? But at the same time, yeah, as a player, you're not getting not really a lot of choices there. You've pretty much set your road. You've made your one macro choice of, yes, this is the road we're going, and now it's kind of like, well, we're on it. Krakow says, I feel like you have to lean really into the mechanics of travel to make journeys interesting or make them matter if random encounters are not a thing. Otherwise, it will just be a thing to be done before the main thing. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the balance we're trying to do. So you have fatigue that has impact. You can also pick up wounds that are impactful. There's a lot of things here where you're picking up shadow. So you have these little meta currencies that you've got that are supposed to kind of, that will kind of dial up the tensions, so that when you're getting somewhere, you're not getting there in pristine form. You're getting there, but you're going to be getting there, and depending on how skilled you are, and of course, luck of the dice, how you're able to get there. And I think that's kind of what they're shooting for. And I think that I do kind of wish, and I think they could have given some more help, because as you're really left on your own to take this thing of like, hey, you've despair, and then you have to kind of decide, oh, what's despair? I mean, they have some of it here. When you go to this page, and you'll get a little bit of, but it's not, you as a GM, you have to get on your improv hats and really kind of go to work with those. So the better you know the material, or at least you have some idea of what they're going through, obviously is going to be better with that. And I think I mentioned in one of those, another time I was talking about a thing, like maybe getting the players to help. Well, one, they'll help feel more involved and not just passengers on this kind of roller coaster ride. But you can also, and like I said, there are a lot of situations in the game where you make a roll and then you look at the results of the roll and decide what you did. And, a lot of people do that with a fumble. Like, oh, you rolled a 1, you fumbled. What did that fumble look like? And you're like, oh, no, I tripped and I almost slit my throat and my sword went flying across the floor. Okay, great. Or, hey, you got the killing, hit my glasses. Hey, you got the killing blow. What does that look like? Or the famous, all right, you they're down. What did you do? And then you get to do that too. And I do think that the rules kind of leave it open that you can add more stuff. They're just not super clear about it, because I can go where they have these entries of things that suggest like, oh, hey, put this here. And I'll just go to one of them. For example, if I'm remembering correctly. Okay, Krako says, is there any chance for journeys to not go as planned, like detours having to cancel them and so on, or do you always arrive at the goal in whatever state you're in? I think so. I think it's kind of in that way a classic point crawl, in the sense that, yeah, you're not totally getting lost. I mean, you could do that, right? I think as a lore master GM of any system, you should and can and should feel free to take this and say, oh, they got an event that's getting lost in the barrow next to the Barrow Downs, so I'm going to say they're in the Barrow Downs. As those things come up, you're basically losing time. But here I'll just I'll give you an example though. Okay, so here we go. Traveling the Chetwood. So if you go in the Chetwood, and the Chetwood is just right here and right next to the Midgewater Marshes, so kind of right on the outskirts of Bree. It says the lore master can use the following table if player heroes decide to venture into the deep parts of the Chetwood or its more dangerous regions near the midwater marshes or the Weather Hills. Simply roll a feat die and consult the table below. So here it's just a little bit unclear. Are we meant to do this and this says we can, so we don't have to. Are we meant to do this instead of a road event? Or are you meant to do this in addition to a road event? Or we do this for once for entering? Or we do this at every hex? There's just a lot of unknowns. They just sort of, a little bit like, hey, just kind of threw it out there. Now, I'm not uncomfortable with this because I feel like, okay, I can grab, but I can see a lot of folks being like, I just don't know. Because, I think this game, it's not supposed to be a sandbox thing where it's just like, oh, whatever, if they die sort of thing, and whatever that it is. So I think there is a little bit of like, man, I don't want the Fellowship to die. If they're supposed to go to Weathertop to do a thing, I don't really mean for them to die before they get to Weathertop on a thing that's not really part of the quest. Now, obviously, you could take whatever comes up, and you should then how it pertains to you should pertain to the adventure. But still, I can see how that could be a question. And it would be nice to know, just like, well, how do you, I'll use it the way I want, but how do you, what's your? Did you have an idea as to why when we were supposed to do this? And the other thing is they don't have these for everything, which is a little bit unfortunate, which I would have liked in a kind of guide for this area. So you have encounters on the East Road. Again, so they say about the East Road encounters, they say the East Road is full of dangerous people and strange locales. Lore masters can roll a feat die and consult the table below if they wish to add a bit of flavor to the player character's journey on its long path. So presumably you can do that. It's kind of just like, well, if you want to or if you don't want to, but I don't know. Do what you will, which is fine. But I think some guidance is good. We have ruins along the Greenway, so we do have that. I don't think did I use this? I don't think I did. Let's see. What are they? Oh no, I did. Wait, did I use the abandoned stable? I don't remember if I did or not. I might have mentioned it, but I think they just passed it by. I think, 'cause I feel like I read that one. Maybe I didn't roll it up. Croco says that gives me the idea for running a journey like a dungeon. I mean, yeah, you could. You totally could. I mean, they're not as dissimilar as they sometimes appear. I mean, they're not exactly the same, but they're not dissimilar. But like, like for where we were going, like the area kind of on the outskirts of the Shire, this area, it's not named and there's not really anything there. And I don't think we even get any just kind of, if that was kind of part of the Blue Mountains, I think everything kind of stops at the Blue Mountains. Like, oh, yeah, there it is. The Blue Mountains. And here it does say Arid Lewin. So if I come here, like, oh, okay, Arid Lewin, but there's not any, like, yeah, there's kind of where our thing was, but not really a sense of what's there. So I think journeys are going to be interesting. I've only run the one, right? But I think it doesn't. I think it doesn't. It doesn't necessarily mean that I can't have some ideas. So I got some interesting comments in some of the shorts I did, and one of the comments was, "Boy, you and that other GM seem to be hacking a lot, and you haven't really played it that much." And one, like, it's just talk. I haven't actually hacked anything yet. So I think the idea that like I'm hacking up the game and presenting some Frankenstein game hasn't all happened yet. But I think it's very rare that anybody, at least people I've talked to, maybe all the people I've talked to are kind of, a lot of us are GMs and we read a lot of systems. And we're always looking at like, oh, wonder if we could tweak that or do this or that. I think it's natural after a game, unless it went, perfectly, which even a perfect game, you probably find something you like to do. We're just talking about it. But I think also, and someone else mentioned, like, you should really play 6 sessions before you start doing that. And I think that's a great goal. Like, yeah, but let's be realistic and practical. 6 sessions is a lot. And a lot of campaigns don't make it 6 sessions, period. And if you only miss one, if you make it every 3 out of 4 weeks, you're playing 2 months before you touch anything. Like, I don't know if that's realistic to think that. To stick with something you don't like for 6 sessions to make it through 6 sessions. I think you have to try it at least a few times, a couple times, maybe, depending on how it goes. And hopefully you got it right and do that. And then you can try something. You can also undo it. It's not a huge deal. I definitely think you should try it before you do it. I don't think you should just, I didn't read the rules, and before I even did a journey once, start saying like, no, I'm changing this, I'm changing that. I haven't actually changed anything yet. But I don't think I have to play for 2 months before I can decide, like, okay, and your game might not last that long. If it really is something that, like, you're at a table and you run the journey and you run it, the journey as written, the first time. It's like, then you run it a second time. Could be even in the same session. Maybe it's the next. It's like, third time. People are like, boo, hiss. You don't tell them, like, well, we got to run this for 3 more sessions. It's like, change, do something, figure it out how to do it. I don't think you need to, there shouldn't be a kind of hard and fast rule, but I think you should definitely do your best to see how at least it can and should be run, or should be. I don't know. It's always that weird thing about, right, the intent stuff, but, see how it runs before you fling it. So I definitely will run Journeys by the book again. I think next time I ran it very mechanically during this game, because I wanted everyone, myself included, to understand mechanically what's happening. So I really was very clear with the mechanics. I think you could run it in a way, kind of like Twin Steel said before he left, where the mechanical part, that part's more or less invisible. It can't be, in this case, it can't really be too invisible because there's a lot of rolls involved for different people. So the guide is rolling, and it's not just one roll for the journey. The whole journey, it's one roll for every segment. So they're rolling a bunch of dice. Then the other person's rolling a bunch of dice. So you can gloss over some stuff, but you can't totally hide the fact, unless I was going to roll the dice myself. I mean, there might be a way of running it where you're rolling all the dice behind the screen, you've got their numbers, and you're narrating it, but then the players really are just listening to you for however long the journey goes, which might not be a ton of fun. Let's see. ES the Mess says, I don't think I've ever used a system as written completely. I think giving something a fair shot is fine, but there's always room to improve things. I mean, yes. I mean, look, I'm not going to say that some systems might not have it nailed down, but I think in this day and age, the idea that people are going to give things 6 sessions, which, like I said, if you're only missing 1 session a month, you're probably looking at 2 months of worth of sessions. You're looking at 2 months of running a game. If you're not mostly satisfied with it, that's a hard, keep running it. We got to make it to 6. Like, that's tough. But do what you can. Hey, Michael Fraker. But the point is I'm talking about potential hacks. I have not actually hacked it yet. So someone come like, boy, you're just hacking it apart. It's like, no, I'm just talking. I mean, that's kind of what we, do, is talking about stuff. And then, someone else mentioned, like, me and the other GM. And the other GM, to their credit, I don't consider what they were doing hacking it. They were just playing loose and free, which I think, like I said, if you missed the beginning of the stream where I kind of went over some of the background about this, I think playing loose is good and fine in different circumstances. But for this game, since we were trying to learn the system to evaluate it, playing loose with what rules you're using and how you're using them tends to be a little bit counterproductive to the evaluation part. It was perfectly fine to the fun part. ES says, I just think people get too precious about rules. I mean, yes, totally can happen. I also think that's why a lot of people gravitate towards rules-like games, because there's not that many rules, so there's not that much to be precious about. So let me go to... So I do like to give all these tables, or not all these tables. They give you a fair amount of tables for different things, but not everything, which is, obviously this is where, hey, okay, I get it. Also, GMs, do some prep, roll up some stuff, throw them in there. I do like that. And I also like these... And I'll get to it. So this is going to be slightly spoilery. So we have some patrons. Here are the landmarks. So these landmarks are little kind of mini adventures. And I think you could also use them if you wanted to structure your own adventures. I ran the first one, which was the Star in the Mist, right? Is that it? Yeah. So this is where I got stuck. You see an ancient tower in the uttermost foothills of the southern arid Lewin. Yeah, see, I should have read foothills, like, oh, it's the mountains, but still, I ended up looking in the wrong places. I was looking for the blue mountains there in Lewin, and these foothills, it's down here. This is where I think even just if they just put a little map fragment in here, would have cleared it up immensely. But I also will argue that you look at the map, it says Blue Mountains. Oops, I keep going on the spider rules. You look at the text, and it says arid Lewin. Just give us make sure we're looking at the same. Put the same words where they are. And this is kind of fun. So there are bandits that are here that have made their camp kind of around here, and they're raiding. So what I had them responding to is the fact that things are disappearing here after they're crossing Sarn Ford. So they're coming through here, crossing Sarn Ford, going towards the Shire, and they're vanishing because you have raiders who are operating in here, headquartered out of here. This one worked, I will say, worked really well. For a couple of reasons. One, I was able to, it's just by chance that I have a hobbit. The player characters are a hobbit, an elf, and the dwarf. so the elf, they're thinking about, well, how are these folks a company? It was kind of like, well, I met them, and they, how do we get together? We all work for Círdan the shipwright, and the elf was kind of sort of the story is maybe a little bit of their, in a sense, their conduit between Círdan, because Círdan, I don't think in the books he ever really leaves this. He probably showed up. I know maybe in the appendices they talk about him when they have the councils of the wise. He's there, but I think ultimately, as far as the books go, I always just think of him as he's just permanently at the Grey Havens and never stirring from the Grey Havens, pretty much. So in a sense that he would communicate maybe with the party through this elf. So the elf ended up having a letter from Círdan that sort of laid out like, hey, I need you to do this thing. Okay. But then there was I was also able to appeal to the dwarf a little bit with the dwarf's thing of being interested in their old haunts and their homeland and stuff, saying, hey, this was an old dwarf, appeal to their lore. And also kind of the desire of like, there's a dwarf thing over here, like do. And of course, for the elf or for the hobbit, this is on the borders of the Shire. So there's also a little bit of like, hey, look out for the Shire kind of thing. I mean, that said, this was not a hard sell. Everyone, I have to say that I mentioned at the start that this whole series of adventures that folks were running was about finding a group that was interested in doing this as an ongoing thing. And I think we've had the group. So kind of mission accomplished thing. Now we have at least 4 of us, including myself, who in some combination, maybe 5, who will be, who are, in this engaged to play. So I think we'll be doing more of this. Now, how much of that will I be in? I don't know what the combinations are. We didn't finish my 1-shot, so I guess it'll be a 2-shot. So maybe I'll be jamming the next time we all get together, but it might be that we'll have multiple characters running around so that we can do different things when different people can show up. But I think we have a group that's going to be doing the system more. So I will have a chance to get to play more in the system and do more in the system because I think I'm going to have an active kind of ongoing thing about it, which is good. And I think one of the players has the Moria book and is interested in doing Moria, so that I'd love to play that or run it, but I'd really like to play it, I think. So in any case, we did the journey rather, got to Sarnford, had a couple of mishaps, but they made their rolls. They did pick up some fatigue, but it didn't seem to hurt them too much. We got to Sarnford, and this was kind of, we exited journey mode and we got more into, adventure mode where they're exploring, looking for clues. Croco says round robin jamming. Yeah, pretty much. And they kind of started going off here into the sort of the grasslands and whatnot. And then I was talking about how they were finding wreckages, which I think they talk about in the background or somewhere in here about the various, the brigands, and they talk about kind of journey events here. Here's another one. This is another area where they sort of they imply stuff that they don't really cover in the main rules. So let me read what they say about journey events. Once the company gets to Sarnford at sunset, they spawn a faint luminescence to the west and can follow it easily like a beacon. As they head in its direction, they can find traces of the presence of a large band of brigands operating in the area. They find the remnants of their camp and may even hear stories about them told by a lonely wanderer or two. If the player heroes are not careful, the brigands may notice the company and send a group of fighters to ambush them while they camp. And then it says, see schemes and troubles. If the players are careful enough, for example, by following the brigands' tracks and trying to stay one step ahead of them, they may be able to avoid them and reach their encampment without having to face them before that. Brigands camp. So this is all cool, but it's like, I kind of wish they had put this support. I kind of wish they had notes about this in the journey part. Because you see it like, oh, if you're in the Chetwood, oh, you can do this if you want. Oh, you can do this one. But they don't really talk about it, I don't think, so much during the actual journey text. So I kind of wish that they would, because they're definitely implying, hey, add this stuff in here. Hey, you have these brigands, they're watching the plains below, so have them kind of interact. But if you were to just read the rules and not play, it's like the thing, if you read the rules, but you didn't play this particular adventure, or maybe you're writing your own, if you're an experienced GM, I think you're going to more or less do what they're saying you're going to do anyway. But I think if you're a newer GM, being given that permission of, if it makes sense, these things, then do that. Don't just limit yourself to the journey events. They're just kind of generic and they're there to help you out. But if it makes sense they're on the barrows and they might get lost in the barrows, like Croco's question, could you get lost in the barrows? Here they're saying like, yeah, you could do something like that. But the regular journey rules, I think, don't make that as clear as they could. And this is more of like a newer GM thing. Obviously, if you've been GMing a lot and you've done different things, you're going to kind of do what you feel is right in the moment. And that will most likely lead you in the right direction. And here they're pretty much saying, hey, do that thing. But I just wish it was a little bit more like, just tell people, be more forward in the encouraging folks to kind of do that. Because I think that's going to make or break a lot of these adventures and journeys and stuff. Let's see. Here's a homebrew says, I need to give the One Ring another look. I like the system, the Year Zero system, but I had a hard time wrapping my head around playing in Middle Earth. Might just be a lack of knowledge on my part. I definitely think that having some background with the stories helps. And that's another thing I wish. I mean, they give you some information here, but you're kind of left on your own on how to narrate things. And it would be nice if they had some tables of things that, just some random, like, hey, here are pull some descriptors that Tolkien uses and throw that into some tables of, oh, hey, you're looking for some ideas for narrating going through the Old East Road or something. Well, here's some blurbs that Tolkien wrote that you could pull out of there and do that. Would kind of be nice. I think, someone mentioned in a comment that they've said that, oh, the One Ring's very crunchy. I don't know that it's super crunchy. I don't think it's, I probably wouldn't even call it as crunchy as 5th edition necessarily, but it's always interesting where the crunch is versus other things. In our case, once I got to Sarn Ford, I kind of went out of journey mode. It seems like I could have had them continue the journey, but I didn't give them this clue about the tower thing right away, as I had them come here, start to investigate, and then get the clue. I do think we did run it as like one travel thing after that, whereas like after they kind of did some investigating and they saw the light, I did have them roll another travel. So that's something that I'll get more comfortable with how I should pitch that. Actually, I feel like the way we did it was totally fine. Not every journey has to be 1,000,000 miles long. It's just that, we broke it up. They got here, they did a thing. Now they have a new landmark. Now they're traveling a landmark. That's another journey, right? So I don't think I did it in a wrong way, in a bad way, but I could have set it up where I could have just added it to the kind of overall thing as the light. But I had them wait until they saw the light specifically. And they did some nice investigating. I thought about the ambush here, but they actually made some good calls about when they had to camp in between when they're on the plains and sort of getting up into those foothills. They needed to camp, and they made sure specifically to look for somewhere that had cover and wasn't exposed and didn't want to have people looking at them. So I was like, yeah, you're careful enough that I don't think I wasn't. And I could have rolled dice for that stuff also, but I just like, yeah, I'm going to give it to you. Like they were like, where can we camp that's kind of out of sight and undercover? And I'm like, all right, yeah, I got you. You're good. Croco says, might be interesting to compare it to MERP. Don't know anything about that either. Yeah, MERP is basically like the what is it? The basic role playing, whichever one's the D100 system, like in RuneQuest, and it's that basic role playing system, I guess, whatever it's called. So it's the D100 system. I have some MERP. I have a few MERP things. I'd love to have some just for kind of collectors, just to kind of have. But it's definitely its own thing. I think the system in many ways is elegant in terms of the character stuff. I've really come around. I think I really like Rollmaster. Thank you, Michael Fricker. I really like, for a lot of the stuff, the player facing roles. So I like that when you're playing the game, you have your thank you, Rollmaster, not Chaosium. Yeah, thanks, Michael Fricker. You have your target numbers. So you can roll the dice and you have your target number, and then you hit your target number, and then you can just tell the referee, hey, I succeeded or not. And I like that. It's just faster. It's just a little bit faster than having to say numbers, and then it's not a ton faster. But when you can just say like, yeah, I succeeded versus I got a 16, and then I have to check whatever. You can just you've got it. And because you're looking at that target number, you as the player are not balancing a whole bunch of modifiers like, well, for this or for that. It's like, no, you just got a target number. You roll your dice, you add your dice, hit your target number. Did you get a Gandalf, which is a 12, or the kind of a crit on the 12-sided die? Did you get 6s on those 6-sided dice? But it works pretty well, and I really like that. I mentioned, I think, other places that the parry. So when you're fighting enemies, some of them have a parry rating, and that parry rating kind of makes it a little bit clunkier than I like, because now if you're rolling and your target number to hit somebody with your sword is, say, 16. If you're fighting something with parry 0, you just go, oh, hey, 16, I got it, right? I succeed. Okay, great. But as soon as someone has parry, let's say they have parry +2, now you can't just say I succeed. you have to go back, have some kind of back and forth where I tell you, okay, they've got parry +2. So instead of rolling 16, you need to roll 18. I have to remember to tell you, or you have to remember to tell me your margins. It's just a little bit clunky. And that's when I had posted something about like, man, I'd love to make it a little bit less clunky because I really like the simplicity of just being able to say like, this is your success. You succeeded. That's it. Great. Like I like that. And so I was like, adding that parry in there, like I get what they're trying to do with it's like kind of an active defense kind of thing, but it's like, and that's where I thought about, man, if I could just take the parry and maybe subtract it from the damage done, because you're doing flat damage, maybe that does an okay job of doing that same kind of effect, but then I can just get rid of having to have the extra back and forth. But I haven't implemented that yet. I haven't done anything with it. Just an idea just to kind of keep it moving. They haven't fought anything with the parry score yet, so I haven't had to worry about it. But not every enemy has parry, so it could be you have a captain and some non-captains, and the captain's got parry, but then the other guys don't. And if it were something like armor class where I'm doing the reference on my side, like, hey, I had armor class 5, then that would be one thing. But in this case, I really like to just saying, like, I succeeded. And then this kind of muddies that up just a bit. So Michael Fraker says that they think Call of Cthulhu 7th edition is perfect. I think I played the one-shot out of the book, like the intro adventure out of Call of Cthulhu 7th. And it was full. It was cool. And then Krako says, not sure how they feel about the D100 roll under. Got to try it. I mean, I think Call of Cthulhu is trying to do specific things. And I wonder how that system plays in the non... So I'm going to wrap up soon and we'll have to do... I was going to pull in Strider editions because someone told me to check Strider edition because they add some stuff into the journey mode, but we'll have to do that another time. But I will say is, I think this system, what they're trying to do, and the journey system plays into this, is they're looking at those interactions between shadow, which is kind of how much you're succumbing to despair and sort of, again, the dark side, for lack of a better word. And that kind of that wearing down, like, oh, you're picking up that fatigue, you're picking up shadow, all these things. And so now you're making decisions. And one of the things I like is that it matters in this game how you do things. So what happened was at the end of our session, they fought the brigands at the camp. So there are these, there's a little map here. So they get here and there are some brigands hanging out by this cave. And they had crept up kind of along this kind of area here. I didn't really play it the way it looks here. I had rocks and stuff, and I kind of had or maybe the cave is, maybe it's more properly there's a cave here. They were kind of coming, so they were able to basically see from a higher position, look down and see the bandits encamped. And I'll just zoom in to make it easier. Okay. So they're something like this, or maybe they're on this side. I don't know. Anyway, they're coming in. Maybe they're here. I don't know. Whatever. They're coming in, and it's like, okay, they're looking down at these bandits who are encamped, and they're kind of around the fire. The bandits don't see them. They rolled really well on their stealth rolls. They creep up. Okay, they decide to ambush. And what I missed was, this is where I'll say the rulebook does a good job. So if I come back, I think it's here. Whoops, here it is. I missed it when I first ran it. It says, if this scene is going to involve combat, very likely, then the lore master should remind the players how killing non-monstrous enemies without provocation may be considered a misdeed and thus cause a shadow gain. And I think this is really, really key. I think this is something that I'm going to make sure in the future that I'm really highlighting this stuff, because like I've mentioned, you're going on these journeys that are wearing you down. You're picking up shadow. You may have shadow already from other things. You've got the stuff. So you're kind of, and then you get in a situation where you're potentially outnumbered and you have a chance to shoot them, loose your arrows at them, jump down and hack them before they can get to you. And in a normal D&D type game, the answer is, heck yeah, this is the point, right? Your OSR game is this is exactly what you do. You get the jump on them. You cut them down before they can cut you down. This is a feature. This is exactly what you're supposed to be doing. However, in Lord of the Rings, the ethos of Middle-earth is that's not what the good guys do. The good guys don't do that. They don't, like these guys, as they look like bandits. They probably are bandits, brigands. You haven't seen them do any brigandage. They didn't catch them in the act. They weren't doing any brigandage now. This is an old ruin. They didn't ruin it. They didn't burn down some lady's house and go sit inside it. This is just some ruin from hundreds, thousands of years ago. And they haven't done anything to you. They're just sitting around the fire, like kind of talking to each other. So you just jumping down and hacking them to bits because you've made these assumptions. Maybe they're good assumptions, but these assumptions, that's a misdeed. Now, I didn't mention it. They went down, they hacked and slashed, and then I was looking at them like, oh, shoot, I missed this whole thing. And I went ahead and gave them the shadow, and nobody objected, which I think is nice. A lot of players, I think, could have been like, oh, you didn't tell us, and this and that. But I was like, look, I'm going to give you the shadow because we're trying to play the game the way it's supposed to be played. I think this was clearly a misdeed given the way the game works and the world works. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, totally. Like, they're like, no, there was no, I really appreciated everybody kind of rolling with me on that because I failed to mention it. I was like, looking at this game, like this is not, because that's just not how you're supposed to be. It's not how you're supposed to be conducting yourself. Not how you're supposed to be doing. So I really appreciate they rolled with me. But I think this stuff, it matters. Like these things matter. And what the game is trying to do is you're building up all this stuff to make it really hard to resist, right? If you've been worn down, you're already looking at your shadow level numbers are kind of up, but you're fatigued. You're looking like, I don't know, you may think to yourself, man, I don't know another way to do this. So you do it. Now, as the GM, it also mentions that you should be providing other methods, right? We're playing this like theory of the mind. We're not using some kind of battle mat or a VTT or everything. And they talk about that, hey, maybe you can do things. Maybe there's a way to sneak around. Like you're supposed to you shouldn't be left with no option. Like it's the, what's that stupid Star Trek exercise? Was it Kobayashi Maru or something where you can only, it's the no-win scenario. Not supposed to be like that. So I think in the future, if I'm doing this, I want to make sure they understand that, but also give them opportunities to find other ways. They should probably not just be one way. Maybe that means taking a long way around, and then there's other difficulties, whatever. Maybe it means just approaching them head on and doing whatever, but there should be other things to do. Michael Frager says, good players or good trust built up with you? Maybe both. I mean, some of them I'd only met 1 week before, so I think they're just rolling with it. I think these players understand kind of like what the kind of the setting is like. I think they have that kind of understanding of the setting. So I thought that was really good. And I think I can see how the journey, at least in the things that the journey ultimately is doing, is taking your character from this fresh state. You're at Bree, you're totally fresh, but by the time you get to this place, like you've just been run down. You've been run down, and the game doesn't really give you a way to it's not like, I think if that kind of, people say like the one adventure, like the one battle adventure day where you just get to pop up, you do something, and then you're fresh as a daisy the next day, so you can just keep kind of novaing up. I think one thing the journey system kind of does is like, yeah, you can't do that. Like you're traveling from Bree down there, like you're not fresh as a daisy. You're not likely to be fresh as a daisy until you're done. So now you have to manage as best you can, you at 80%. And now when you're at 80%, it's easier to say, like, we got to ambush these guys. And maybe you do have to. And then you just eat that shadow and you go, oh, I'm going to have to try to make it up another time, but I got to do this. Or you make a hard choice to do something else. And I think that's really key to enjoying this game. I think really meet it where it is. It wants you to be engaging with making those hard choices in games like D&D don't really ask you to do. Ian says, yeah, I like this morality system, at least with the assumption that any shadow consequences would be disclosed to the players beforehand. Yeah, and I think the more you play, you'll more get into it. But yes, I think you're supposed to be kind of like, hey, just so you know, like this is a shadow kind of thing. Yeah, this game is not meant to be like in the, like those, the unfortunately often what happened often with alignment where the GM's like, gotcha, like you crossed over that alignment line and you didn't think you were kind of thing. Like that. And so I that's a long way of saying, just when I was talking about thinking about Call of Cthulhu, is I think Call of Cthulhu works similarly in that Call of Cthulhu wants you to be at that razor's edge of insanity. And so the system is designed to put you at that razor's edge. And so having this D100 where you're going to have a few skills that you're potentially pretty good at, but a bunch of skills that you are not very good at, and you're not going to be able to sit on your preferred skills all the time. You're going to be, circumstances are going to force you to have to do all these other skills that you're not very good, which then forces you to be a gambling person with using your luck and using that stuff, which ultimately is going to drive your sanity down so that you're going to be in that insanity range. And that's over the course of an adventure, that's where they want you to be. Like that's where the tension is. Can you can you do this thing without going totally insane? And how well can you do that, right? So can you both solve the situation? Can you do it with retaining your humanity, kind of thing? So I wonder, I have not played, I wonder with some of the other systems that are based upon a similar framework, but don't have something like sanity or shadow or these other things where it's like it's just ye old fantasy system. I wonder how that kind of framework with a bunch of skills that you're kind of middling to poor at works when there's not like a driving force. But I kind of I get it with Call of Cthulhu. At least I think I do. Someone can correct me if I've got it totally wrong, but that's what I think. And that's what I think about the One Ring. That I think they want you to really play with your actions, what they mean, those consequences, and they want to put you in a situation so that's not, if you're at full health all the time and everything's great, then it's easy to take these harder decisions. But having to go through this kind of wearing down, it's like you don't know you're leaving Breed 100%, but you don't know when you get to the Sarn Ford, you don't know what you're going to be at. So that changes how you approach everything after you get there. And you're like, I don't, maybe you're in good shape and you feel good, and maybe you don't, and you got to play with that in terms, and everything else. I'll go in more of this because, like I said, it looks like we got a group. We're gonna be playing some of this, so there will be more. I wish I had gotten further, but it was fun walking through this with everybody. So we'll do more of this. I do want to read through some of the Strider mode stuff. It might be fun to play some Strider mode. And now that I have an okay grasp, at least on the basics. I haven't even gotten into the Eye of Mordor stuff that I'm kind of interested in, but I need to read more. There will be more. So, let me know if you want more of this, and let me know with your thumbs and all that kind of stuff. That's about it. I don't know what the schedule is going to be. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to get online next week. The holidays are fast, quickly approaching and all that. And then between Christmas and New Year's, I wouldn't count on there being too much. So I'm sure I'll stream at least once or twice next week, but it might be like Monday, Tuesday, and then the rest of the week I'm gonzo. So we'll see. So if I happen to miss you between now and then, have an amazing holiday and New Year. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody. Talk to you later. Bye now.